we are programmed early in life to be self-saboteurs. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too dark, you're too light, you're too feminine, you're too masculine. It's all of this stuff. And then we kind of believe it. It's like we're gaslighted from our early childhoods. And someone else has defined our reality for us. That seeps into how we deal with our feelings. And so it's a lot of repair that has to be done there, and a lot of unlearning and relearning how to have more self-compassion.
All right, let's kick off today's show. We're talking with Dr. Marc Brackett, founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and author of the best-selling Permission to Feel and new book, Dealing with Feeling. He joins us to level up our emotional intelligence and gives us his favorite framework, Ruler, to build your emotional regulation muscle. Mark shares why most people fail at emotional regulation attempts, how your emotional budget gets depleted daily, as well as the real difference between anxiety, stress, and fear, and why behavior isn't feeling and what parents miss. Welcome to the show, Mark. Great to have you.
Thank you.
I know Johnny and I have always been fascinated with how to develop emotional intelligence. It's what we work with our clients on. And I think one of the pieces that everyone often skips in their pursuit of emotional intelligence is recognizing and regulating their own emotions. We'd love to recognize others' emotions and regulate theirs. And I think it's such a powerful skill. Why is it that we're not really taught how to regulate our emotions? What's going on?
Yeah, that's how much time do you got? Um, I mean that seriously. I mean, it's fascinating to me that what I think is probably the most important skill that we can develop to have satisfying lives and be productive, build good relationships, which is emotion regulation. Somehow or another, we think that we're just going to learn it through osmosis, which we do. Maybe I could start by asking you, like, what did you learn about emotion regulation growing up in your family?
Funny enough, I would find my dad fly off the handle and then go quiet. And the
Hmm.
impact was the silent treatment. So I always felt ashamed of showcasing my emotions and what the impact would be on others. So my emotional regulation was to go inward.
Yeah. So you suppress, deny, or ruminate. Do those sound like familiar strategies?
Yeah. And then think, what's wrong with me that I can't seem to regulate these feelings, especially trying to be scientific and logical in the way I was approaching things.
Hmm. And so I think, I just use that as an example. Most of us, the reason why we can't regulate is because we were never taught how. We just never had good role models for it. I mean, I grew up in a family with two parents who loved me a lot. They told me they loved me. Um, and my father, crazy anger. My mother, terrible anxiety. And so my father was yelling, screaming, "Go to your room. Who do you think you are?" And my mother was like, "Don't talk to him. I'm having a breakdown." Like, okay. So I guess I'll become a psychologist and learn how to deal with my feelings. Just it's interesting to me how little information people get about this stuff.
The other side of the coin is how often we dismiss the impact of those emotions. We like to think that we're logical and we're rational when it comes to making decisions and when it comes to managing relationships, that we can strategize our way to it. But really, the emotions are running a lot of these behaviors and actions in our lives, and we're not even realizing it.
They are. And by the way, that's why emotional intelligence is so important because emotions impact our thinking, our relationships, our decision making, our health, our performance, um, and especially the kind of strong, unpleasant ones. But that happens outside of conscious awareness generally. I mean, think about it. When you're really pissed and you're saying something that's mean or hurtful to someone else, or you're being self denigrating, you don't usually pause and say, "Gosh, I'm being a jerk right now because I'm feeling this way." It's kind of like it goes out like fast and automatic. And what emotional intelligence tells us we need to do is we need to pause. We got to recognize that emotion. And then we got to figure out, is that emotion helpful or unhelpful for the goal that I have at hand? And if it's unhelpful, what's my strategy for shifting?
Oftentimes, that's extremely hard when that emotion is overloading us. And you
Hmm.
bring up a concept that I had never heard before that I think a lot of us can recognize, but we haven't really thought of, which is that emotional regulation budget and how quickly it can be depleted. I'm a new parent, so I'm recognizing it quite frequently.
It's a big one, and it's one of the reasons why people fail at their regulation attempts. So, in my work, I oftentimes ask people, what does it mean um, to be the best version of yourself as a parent? Like, how do you want to be seen? How do you want to be talked about? How do you want to be experienced as a parent? Oh, I want to be caring and loving and compassionate. I'm like, all right, good. Let's set that goal. You're going to be that loving, caring, compassionate parent. And then I check in with them a week later. I'm like, how'd it go for you? Uh, I was nasty to my kid, at breakfast. I'm like, well, why? And oftentimes they don't realize it is they didn't get a good night's sleep. So their threshold is just so much tighter because it's thinner because they haven't gotten the replenishment that they need. That sleep provides us in order to um, have a brain that is capable of handling the distress.
Break that down. How can we start to manage that budget now that we're starting to realize we actually have one?
I consider myself to be a prevention scientist as opposed to an interventionist. And so that awareness, it's, I was working with someone recently and she's like, I get my best work done between 8 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. And I said, okay, what time do you get up in the morning? I have to be up at 6 with my kids. So I said, wait, you're working from 8 p.m. till 2:30 and you're getting up at 6, so you're getting like 3.5 hours of sleep every night? She's like, yeah. And I said, well, how's that working? And she's like, it's terrible. I'm a mess. And I said, okay, well, great that you get your best work done. She's a teacher. So she was kind of like doing her like real job during the day and then whatever job she was doing at night. Um, I said, maybe we can like reallocate some of your hours so that you can get a little bit more sleep. And so I think what we have to do, which I don't think a lot of people do either, is I'll give you an example. I'm very organized. Well, I'm like, I would say I'm very organized on paper. Um, and I have a calendar that's very, very detailed to the point where some people think I'm weird. I will schedule thinking time. Sorry to say it, but I don't know. I'm a writer, right? So like, I got to think about what I'm going to write. I can't just do a write. Sometimes I got to like take time to just like an hour. I need to like draw out my ideas. I work out 4 days a week. Every workout is on my calendar, and I'm sharing that with you because I don't think people schedule their well-being time. And I think we have to do that if we're going to live a healthy life and be like get that budget, you know, to where it needs to be. We need to make it a priority in terms of our health and wellness.
I don't think people could schedule that sort of well-being time if they wanted to, due to technology. It's just like, well, I could stare at a wall and think, or I can doom scroll, and of course the addiction is the doom scrolling. But I'm with you personally. For myself, I I like to wander through my mind. I'm a creative, so it's like I think about the songs that I'm writing. I'm thinking about the content that I'm writing. I'm thinking about angles that I want to take for both of them. Um, and the only way that I'm able to do that is to do direct and a strict thinking time. And of course, it's targeted so that I get it done. But I'm not going to come up with ideas doom scrolling. I'm not going to come up with ideas listening to Twitter Spaces in the background.
No,
That's
you need discipline, right? But
absolutely.
I think awareness is the first step. Awareness is the first step. And so asking people, do you think that your calendar is working for you to have good well-being? No, it's terrible. For example, I'm a workaholic, like many of us are. I work crazy hours, probably 80, 90 hours a week. I like what I do, so I don't always think of it that way.
Mhm.
Right.
However, at the same time, I have gotten into fitness a lot over the last 5 years, and I now get angry when I'm scheduled over my wellness time.
Yeah.
Like it actually, it affects me viscerally. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I don't need to have that meeting. That meeting can wait. The work is never going to end. My body is going to collapse. So guess what? I'm making myself a priority.
For myself, missing a workout depletes me of that emotional regulation, being hangry. So if I fasted for too long, my wife will call me out like, "Hey, eat something," before responding to me. And LA traffic, I laugh and joke about it on the show quite a bit, but that environmental factor of like having to compete with everyone trying to get where they're going and people pulling crazy maneuvers just heightens my stress level to the max, that I become reactive in ways that I don't want to with my wife, and I certainly don't want to with my baby. So I think that awareness, it's like people recognize sleep. That's a pretty big one, but we don't often think about, okay, well, our nourishment, our physical health, moving our body, and then the environmental factors, as Johnny talked about, getting out of your office, getting in nature, allowing yourself to regulate that emotional state a lot more effectively.
I work at a place where people, like, everybody's productive, right? It's like these kids are come out of the womb productive. It's like this obsession with like achievement. And I was not born one of those. I became one of those. That's a whole other story. But the and so, for example, I'll just give this a study I did. So I did a study with our students here about on mindfulness and like relaxation. And it was a funded study. It was quite a lot of money. I raised this grant. Every student got paid a couple $100 to participate.
Okay.
And so, like, let's say 300 students sign up for the study. They're all going to get their couple $100 to be participants in this study on breathing and mindfulness. They all show up to the first session because they want, they got to take their surveys. Do you know that by the end of the 8 weeks, 80% of the students dropped out? 80% dropped out.
Wow.
What do you think the average time students spent doing the breathing exercises and mindfulness was?
Oh, I'd say less than 5 minutes.
0.
Yeah.
And so then I interviewed the students at the end, and I'm like, I mean, I thought I gave a really good lecture on the brain science about why this matters and how it's going to help you be more productive. Because I don't know about you, but I live in the countryside and I love where I live now in the mountains. And I just sit outside sometimes and it's like the most amazing ideas come to me. And there's good data to show that space is actually a productive space for your brain to produce creativity or creative ideas. But for somehow or another, they've learned from going to their schools and preschool up until today that no, your productivity comes from staying up late and being in the library and like reading and writing and pounding and killing yourself. And so those mindsets about healthy regulation are they are what's the word I'm thinking of? They are distorted, and it's my job to help people kind of see the light in a different way. But it's work because their mindset is, well, if I meditate and I breathe and I practice all these exercises, I'm not going to get into medical school. I'm not going to get into like Harvard Law School. I'm not going to get the job at Goldman Sachs. And I want to tell them, like, I've known all those people who got the jobs at Goldman Sachs. They hate their jobs after 2 years. So,
Yeah, and they're coming to you for exactly that, breath
exactly.
work, mindfulness.
The hustle culture certainly doesn't support that. Personally, for myself, and I've been blessed with the opportunity of dicking around with this garden. I'm visiting my dad right now, and so for the last 2 summers, I aside of walking and aside of going to the gym, which are my two times to think about things and work through stuff, dicking around the garden is the new one, and it's been great because I can go out there and mindlessly pick weeds and mess with the garden, but I'm able to focus my mind on other things. But the mindfulness aspect of this garden is going to be beautiful when I'm finished with it today, but also I put up a smorgasbord for every critter in the neighborhood to feast on the thing, which I'm now battling. But um, but I love it. I mean, these are the things, the outdoor things, putting your hand in the dirt and being in the grass. There's just It certainly helps with getting a hold of your thoughts, because everything else around us is speeding them up.
There's good research to support that. I mean, especially like when you're looking at nature, there's a sense of awe that comes from that. That like
Oh yeah,
life is bigger than me. It's this universe. That's a beautiful thing. The one thing you're making me think about though is that um, it's almost as if we're afraid to be with ourselves.
absolutely.
In that still, in that stillness, oh my gosh, I'm going to reflect on my life. I'm going to reflect on my feelings. I'm going to have time to like, you know, and I don't want to go there. So I'd rather just doom scroll, like you said, and I think what people don't realize is that that actually creates more havoc in our lives. That
Yeah.
pushes us further away from our true nature. But it seems like it's easier. It's like the quick fix, the dopamine hit that we get from that is more rewarding in the short run than being still.
Going along with that, this concept of emotional regulation, we're not taught it. And because of it, we have these maladaptive practices that we've cobbled together to try to handle it. But, our audience is looking to unlock that extra level of performance. So, what can we do practically that scientifically shows can help us in this area so we can teach them how to effectively regulate these emotions, now recognizing how important it is?
Well, as you know, I wrote a whole book on this. So, and by the way, it's funny because I wrote a book years ago called Permission to Feel that was all about why we need to be open to emotions and value our emotions. And then the pandemic came and people were like, Mark, thanks for giving me permission to feel, but what the heck do I do with all these freaking feelings? And I was like, oh shit, people need strategies. And so I really spent a lot of time mapping this out in terms of a process for people. And I think first, I just want to define emotion regulation for you,
Yeah.
which is emotion regulation includes the thoughts and the actions. So, how we think about things and what we do. So, going outside and gardening, or Mark, take the high road, right? Something I say to myself or something I do. Um, so, emotion regulation is the thoughts and actions we do to prevent unwanted emotions. So it's like forward looking, like, oh, when I go to my father's house, it's going to not be fun. So I'm going to prevent whatever I can from happening. I'm going to reduce difficult emotions. Like in the moment, I'm pissed, got to reduce it. I want to initiate an emotion. I want to create an emotion for this meeting, for this, this podcast. I want to maintain it. I'm feeling, I had a great meeting just now. Um, every once in a while, I do these trainings for my own team. We had 2 hours. It was really fun. I don't normally do that, a lot. So it was great to just be with my people and like talk about the concepts. And I like that mood I was in. And so I'm going to preserve that mood, like with you guys.
Right.
Or I want to enhance or boost the mood. And the goal of emotion regulation is to use all of our feelings wisely to achieve goals, to have a better relationship, to make a better decision, to achieve an outcome or whatever goal I have, a work goal, a home goal. So I just want to put that out there that emotion regulation, thoughts and actions to achieve goals. And so the question is, where do you begin? Well, lo and behold, it goes back to permission to feel. The first strategy is radical acceptance of your emotions. Okay, guess what? I'm anxious. For me, it's something I can say to myself, like, what's new? But I've had anxiety my whole life. It's like, okay, you're anxious today. Go figure. Um, versus, oh my God, I'm anxious today. There's something wrong with me. I gotta, like, what am I gonna do? I need to go see the doctor. I need to do this. Like the kind of like oh my gosh, like this is a bad emotion. So I just want to encourage people who are listening to know that there is no such thing as a bad emotion. As a matter of fact, anxiety is so kind of like on top of everyone's mind right now. People are anxious about politics. They're anxious about climate change. They're anxious about school shootings in New York City. They're, you know, we're just anxious about so many things. And like my reaction to that is like, good. You should be anxious about those things.
Right. You care
Right?
about it.
Exactly. Point taken, AJ. It's like that's the whole point. That we have anxiety because we care about things. And so if you think about it, oh, I'm anxious because I care about it, why would that be a bad thing? It's an interesting switch.
Yeah.
It's a reframe. So that's step one. Permission to feel. No such thing as a bad emotion.
For so many, they get clasped to their identity, these feelings and emotions. Like, I'm an anxious person. They label it and then they look for it in other areas. And it's not to say that there aren't anxiety disorders that, require more than this. But for many of us who have these emotions, when we start to label it and then put it in our identity, then it has a much stronger hold on those behaviors and ultimately us reaching our goals. And the reframe for me that was really healthy early on was recognizing that this is a chemical reaction. Like that anger when I'm driving in LA, it's a chemical reaction. It's not me. I'm not an angry person. Oh, it's something going on chemically that it'll pass, it'll dissipate, and I can start to diffuse myself from that emotion and not hold on to it so hard.
I want to like finesse your thinking a little bit. Also a cognitive reaction, right? It's
Yeah,
because emotions are cognitions. You're feeling angry. There is a neurochemical involved in it, but in the end, your emotions are in your brain, and you're feeling angry because you've perceived something as an injustice, or you're feeling disappointment because you had an expectation that wasn't met. And it's an important add-on to what you're saying for people
yeah.
to understand that there is usually some kind of stimulus in the environment. Somebody says something to you, you get news, whatever it might be, and then all of a sudden you have that kind of physiological response, the cognitive response, and then to be a behavioral response.
The reframing piece, it's so powerful, and whatever you have to find that allows you to create that space and that gap, that's what I was getting to, is because oftentimes we then just cling to the emotion, and it gets even worse when we start to label and identify as that emotion.
What you were saying is really important, which is that we are not our emotions. We experience emotions. And I think that the minute you identify as I'm an anxious person, or I'm a depressive, or I'm this, you've kind of almost like decreased your potential for shifting how you feel, because you become, you have this fixed mindset around who you are. And the great thing about emotions that's guaranteed is they are impermanent. They are ephemeral processes, just like there are rainy days and there are sunny days. When it's a rainy day, we feel like it's going to rain forever, but God has given us sunny days. And
Thankfully.
so, yeah. And when it's sunny, we want to hold on to the sun, but look out, there's going to be a rainy day. So, life is just a roller coaster ride of emotions. And just that's what makes us beautiful people.
So that recognition and allowing the reframe. Now, let's keep walking through what we can do on this regulation piece.
The permission to feel piece is more like the attitudinal, like it's okay to have these feelings. It's okay for you to have your feelings. I'm not going to judge them. Then it comes like self awareness. You do need to be self aware. You got to know how you're feeling. Can I play a game with you guys?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. You might lose the game. I'm just letting you know up front. What's the difference between anxiety, stress, and fear?
Hmm.
This is probably the most silence you've had on your podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna have to edit that out while we're thinking. We need some like thinking music here. I don't know.
And you're not alone. 95% of the people that I study have no idea what the difference is because we're not taught it. Again, goes back to teaching. And you might wonder, a lot of people, like business people, when I do this little exercise, they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, here's the professor trying to impress us, or they're like, who cares? But it matters. So anxiety is about perceived uncertainty, right? I'm anxious about the fact that I can't predict the outcome.
Okay.
Stress is when I have too many demands and not enough resources to deal with it. Fear is about a real impending danger. So now that you know that anxiety is about kind of the perceived uncertainty, stress is having too many demands, not enough resources, and fear is about impending danger, my question to you is, do you think that knowing how you're actually feeling, because they all kind of can look and feel the same in the body,
Right.
but
Sure.
psychologically they're different. Do you think you might use, I'm going to touch you as a parent now or as a colleague, do you think how you would support someone in regulating would vary as a function of labeling it accurately?
Absolutely. And I may be wrong, but it feels to me in the way that you're breaking it down that there's a timeline component here. So anxiety is future facing, like what could happen, the uncertainty. The stress is like what is actually happening to me right now. I'm overloaded. And the fear is often tied to past experiences or things that have been shared with us that we should be fearful of.
Or just in the moment, like you're at home and by yourself and you don't expect anybody's going to join you and then you hear the door open. It's like, uh-oh. Right? It's like that disruption of your like what you think is supposed to happen.
Right.
I live in the countryside. When I first moved there, I was sitting in my little home office, and a bobcat walked by my office. I'm like, "We're dead. Like we're moving." It's like, of course, I didn't know anything about bobcats, but so my perception at that moment was like, "Dogs are dead. We're dead. It's over." That's fear. Anxiety is when the pandemic hit and my center shut down because the university shut down. It's like, when is it going to open? Like, every
Yeah.
soon, maybe. The stress was I got 5,000 emails from people who were having nervous breakdowns saying, "Mark, we need your help. What's your," I'm like,
Right.
I don't have enough time in the day to respond to these emails. That's stress. To see, and so like the strategy for the stress was like, Mark, you're gonna do the best you can today, or you're gonna delegate it and get other people to respond. That's how I'm gonna deal with the stress. The anxiety was, Mark, you have no control over this pandemic. You're not the president of the university. You don't work for the CDC. You're gonna make no choices about this. You're gonna just have to go with the flow and just tell yourself that every day. You're going with the flow. You're going with the flow. And then for the fear, that's something you got to investigate or protect yourself.
Right. Actually do something about.
Yeah, like okay, there's a fire. This is not a time to ponder. Get out.
Right. Bobcat, lock the door.
Exactly.
I'm curious because you bring up parenting, and I think emotional regulation obviously is very impactful to us as professionals in our career. But I just want to sidebar a little bit because I'm really curious about this now, approaching emotional regulation around children that you're in care of, and how to do that in a meaningful way. Because we've all seen the tantrums, the emotional dysregulation in children, and how stressful that can be and overwhelming to us as parents.
It's the same thing, buddy. It's like you just start off with you got to be the role model. If you are showing up at work or at home with your kid and you're kind of shaking and like talking this way and like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like the world's coming to an end. That your kid is gonna absorb that. When your kid gets activated, if you're like, you know, running, if you run out of the room, or you yell at the kid, they're gonna feel that. And so the first step in what we call co-regulation, which is what parents are doing with kids, is you've got to deactivate your arousal because you're going to get triggered by the crying, you're going to get triggered by the whatever it is. I don't know if you or most people do.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I can do it. I can get through this. It's just crying. The kid is not attacking me. The kid is just whatever they're feeling. And so like just having that mindset can be really helpful. Kind of just like, I'm going to give myself permission to feel uncomfortable right now, but it doesn't have to do anything about it. And my kid is clearly, has a need that's not being met. So deep breathing. I know people think that's cliche at this point. I think it's the number one strategy. It just helps you to be still. It's not sufficient. You just can't breathe your whole way through life. I mean, you have to breathe your way through life, but it's not sufficient for regulation. Um, and then there's a lot of self talk.
Okay.
How do I want to show up for my kid? What do I want to, how do I want my kid to experience me right now? So that's the beginning stages. When they're older, and they have language, then you have to show that kind of unconditional support, validation, be curious explorers of their emotions. And then you got to help them with strategies, learn those strategies. Let's take a walk. Let's do some breathing together. Let's cuddle. Just you play around with it, because not everybody's going to want the same thing. We are talking about that recently. There are people who are huggers, there are people who aren't huggers. No problem.
Yeah, it's recognizing that and reacting to that.
And personality will matter. People think I do a lot of public speaking. Everybody thinks I'm outgoing. And I actually don't even like people, to be honest. Just kidding.
Hence moving to the country.
Yeah, exactly. I'm an introvert. And so for me, like today, I've got meetings. I have about a 45-minute commute. I had meetings on my way here, meetings all day. When I go home today, I'll get home around 6. The last thing I want to do is make a phone call or like have friends over. I'm lucky I have a pool in my house. I'm going swimming by myself. And
Okay.
I'm just going to like do laps and I'm just going to like zone out. That's what I need to restore. Someone else, after a long day at work, they're like sports bar, wanting music and, screaming. That would put me into a hospital. So, it's just, that's life. Life is, so let me, before I'm sharing so many little anecdotes here, but permission to feel, label it accurately. You got your budget that we spoke about already, which
Mhm.
is like the sleep and the nutrition and the exercise. And then the other buckets are the breathing, as we've spoken about. Big bucket there, lots of activities there. And then I think the bucket that is the most powerful, that I wrote a lot about in dealing with feeling, is the cognitive bucket. For somehow or another, I think that we are programmed early in life to be self-saboteurs. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too dark, you're too light, you're too feminine, you're too masculine. It's all this stuff. And then we kind of believe it. It's like we're gaslighted from our early childhoods. And someone else has defined our reality for us. And then that seeps into how we deal with our feelings. And so it's a lot of repair that has to be done there, and a lot of, you know, unlearning and relearning how to have more self-compassion.
So what is that like initial signal that this is an area where you have to relearn or you have to unpack for many of us when we're in that regulation state?
When you mess up, what's the first thing that you say to yourself? Let me ask the two of you that. Like when you mess up with your kid, like or your wife or your partner, whatever you're in, like when you really mess up, what's your go-to cognitive strategy?
Yeah, for me it is embarrassment. I have shame tied to it. Like again, I want to retreat, right? It goes back to that emotional outburst and then I just want to retreat into solitude.
And John, how about for you?
It's difficult to pin it because it's such a broad question. But for myself, yeah, I'm mad at myself and I want to channel it into something creative.
That's a great kind of redirection if you can do that. So that would be a healthy way to deal with emotions.
I got plenty of songs written from that experience. I got records written.
Well, that's good. You're sublimating.
And again, that's what I learned from my dad. That's when my dad was pissed off, he would go into the music room and start playing. So it's just what I had always done my whole life. I never, and in fact, in getting involved in this field, I mean, I've always known that about myself. That was a channel. That's an outlet that I've always had. And then once you recognize it, that its value, you find other ways to do that same thing. So guitar playing is one, writing is another, working in the garden is another, taking it out in the gym, finding a way to be productive with now newfound energy that if not dealt with can tear you apart.
This is a good example, like to expand upon, because it's like all strategies are both helpful and could be unhelpful. And let me give the example. So let's say, you're a parent. Let's go back to AJ for a minute. You're a parent and you're like, gosh, I'm really doing a shitty job here. I'm going to go write a song about it. It's like, no, AJ, you got to figure out how to have a relationship with your kid. And so they say like you have to really evaluate the strategy. Is it helping to achieve the outcome? And I think writing is a fabulous strategy, by the way. But like it's like that might be good for certain feelings and certain things, but not for everything.
I know my wife wouldn't be happy if I retreated to my guitar and wrote a song about pissing her off. So, these are situations where when there's others at play in a relationship that we're managing, retreating into solitude is actually really harmful. And it's one of those patterns that I've had to work on in my personal relationships of like, hey, you're feeling that embarrassment and shame, but I still want to talk to you. Like I want to regulate and express what's going on here.
There's an organization that I'll plug called Yale Guitar Doors. And it's a few musicians, but what they do is they take acoustic guitars to jail, to lockup, and they teach inmates how to use them to write and channel their energy. And one of the things I found fascinating is there are stories about how those guys have never had an outlet. They've never been taught anything. I mean, it's one of the reasons why they're finding themselves in jail for life. Um, so that to learn something like that can certainly give you a brand new uh, perspective on things that you've done, things that you're doing right now, and things that you're going to be doing in the future.
I have a podcast that's about my work. It's called Dealing with Feeling also. And I interviewed Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses. And, it was really interesting because, he talked about how one day he was walking around Seattle, nobody knew who he was. The next day, like he's on billboards and famous, and how like that messed with his head and he had no strategies to deal with it. And really interesting conversation. Then it resulted in a lot of drug use and alcoholism you know, um, and then he said, I was curious about like, because some people say, well, I'm the most creative when I'm, high. And he was saying how now, as he's gotten older and he's been sober, like he feels he's his most creative place. And it was a really great conversation, around strategies and dysregulation and, how do and the link between regulation and creativity, which I think is really interesting in terms of how we can channel our emotions for creative things as you do, John.
I'm curious about exploring that a little further because it feels like it is a bit of a fine line between the regulate and the escape and the bury and the, whether it's drugs or alcohol or some of these maladaptive strategies, what should we be aiming for to not fall into the escape pattern, but to actually be meaningfully regulating what's going on?
I think goes back to the reflection piece, which is, I used to be a martial arts instructor, and I taught like classes at gyms, and I'd see people like 6 hours a day at the treadmill, and I'm like, that is not a good strategy. Yes, exercise is good, but like you're overdoing it. It's like, um, and so every one of these buckets that I'm talking about, breathing, you can, I used to belong to a meditation center, and I would see all these people who were really suffering just escape and live in the Zen temple all day long on the cushion. I'm like, dude, you got to get out in the real world and try this out. You got to ask the girl on a date. Um, you know, this is not going to help you. This is going to be like debilitating. You're going to get lost in this reflection. And so it goes back to asking yourself the difficult questions, which is how I'm living my life, is how I'm dealing with my feelings helping me achieve my goals or not? And so it's that, we got to pause and check in with like how it's working for us. It's like John with your music. I'm sure that for the most part it's really helpful. And maybe there's sometimes it's not helpful.
Oh, it's my favorite escape as well.
It's both an adaptive and a maladaptive strategy depending on the context.
Yeah, almost dosage dependent.
Yeah, exactly. And so everything is like that. I mean, I can't tell you how many people like toxic positivity, right? It's like everything's going to be fine. I'm like, you may think that way. I'm telling you, it's not fine. So it's like we have to work through this, just so you know. Like, I'm glad you're like everything's gonna work out. Like, shit happens. I'm like, okay, thank you. Now let's really work through the problem. Um, and so, yes, you want to be self compassionate, but you don't want to be self compassionate that you excuse yourself from doing the hard work.
One piece that we love, at least, and we've had a couple episodes on it now, I think has been frustrating us, is this emotional vocabulary. So again, going back to what we shared earlier, that we're just not learning this. And we just had a really fascinating episode around psychobabble and how a lot of these psychological terms are now being expanded and mislabeled in ways that are distorting the way we're perceiving reality, calling everyone a narcissist or everyone a sociopath. Now, a lot of us really struggle in the emotional vocabulary area, and the labeling piece is actually really impactful for us to regulate these emotions, because if we're mislabeling things, we're not going to be able to actually process them. So help us, as we're now recognizing maybe we don't have the emotional vocabulary, that telling fear, stress, and anxiety apart.
Well, have I got a gift for you? The reason why I say that is for the last 5 years, I've partnered with the co-founder of the company Pinterest, and we built an app that's called How We Feel, which is available for free across the world in multiple. It's in Android and iOS, and it has 500 emotion words built into it with their definitions. And so it's a really cool tool. Uh, I could be proud and say we got a big award from Apple a couple of years ago for it, and I've had about 3 million people use it, and it's built to help you identify your feelings more accurately. And so what it does is it helps you see through using a tool that we've created called the mood meter, which is basically there's two axes. You got pleasantness and you got energy.
Okay.
-5 to +5 from like in your brain. How pleasant do you feel right now? -5 is like this is the most unpleasant experience. +5, the most pleasant. Energy is do you feel exhausted and tired, or do you feel energized? And you cross those axes and you get this quadrants: yellow, red, blue, and green. Yellow, high energy, pleasant. So, what are some words for high energy and pleasant emotions? Just shoot them out.
Uh, Joyful, ecstatic,
Happy, excited, elated, jubilant, ebullient, optimistic. And so that's the yellow. The green, it's pleasant but lower in energy. What do you think?
calm, relaxed,
Content, tranquil, peaceful, serene.
zen.
And then
Yeah.
we got the left side. We got unpleasant feelings. And remember, I'm saying unpleasant, not negative, not bad. Unpleasant. The blue, low energy, unpleasant. What do you think?
Depressed.
Sad, down, disappointment, hopeless, despair, despondent, depressed. And then the red is the anxiety and the anger family.
Frustration.
So from
Yeah.
peeved to enraged, or from uneasy to terrorized or panicky. And so it creates this beautiful um, picture of your emotional life. And so what we have people do is they look at that app design and they can move their finger around and see exactly how they're feeling, and then see the differences between the emotions to help them get it more, be more accurate.
And why is that labeling so helpful from the regulation standpoint?
This is a big one for like parents and kids. Your kid is 4 years old or 5 years old, and they come in the house stomping their feet. I hate you. How are they feeling? What do you think?
Well, hatred,
What
anger,
else? Anger. And firstly, the big question is, how do you know? And the answer is you definitely don't, because behavior is not feeling. We're brought up in a very strange world where, especially for boys, they're not going to come feeling, I'm feeling shame right now. I'm feeling humiliated and embarrassed. They're not going to do that. They're going to show up with a lot of anger, a lot of like, built up. So one is you got to know as a parent, like behavior is not feeling, behavior is behavior. Now my job is to find out how the kid is feeling, or how my partner's feeling, or how my colleague's feeling. Then, you ask some questions. Um, well, I let's make it like now it's an older kid. I failed my test. Well, let's find out why you failed your test. Did you fail it? Well, the teacher told me that we only had to know these three things and there were other things on the test. Okay. So that's not fair, right? So that is anger. Was there anything unfamiliar? I said, no, it was always there. So, what I'm hearing is that you didn't study the things that were on the test. Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot to study that piece. Oh, you're probably disappointed because you had an expectation that wasn't met. And so, do you see, I'm doing that kind of emotion coaching with anybody. It could be my partner, it could
Yeah, it
be
doesn't have to be a
my
kid.
kid, it could
Yeah.
be anybody. To like, tell me more, tell me more. Oh, and I'm listening really carefully for the underlying theme around the feeling. Is the theme around injustice? Is the theme around unmet expectations? Because those are one's anger, one's disappointment. Now, as that co regulator for my partner or my kid or my colleague, I could think of, okay, well, so what might be helpful? What suggestions might I make to help that person manage the disappointment? So for me, like because I was not athletic as a kid, but I got into martial arts. I failed my yellow belt test. It was like devastating. I'm like a loser. I'm being bullied, and now I failed my freaking yellow belt test. Couldn't get any worse. And so the question is like, did I fail it because I freezed and I panicked, or did I fail it because I didn't know the moves? And so, like, how I would help my kid would be, I need more data to know. Oh, you panic, so we need to help you build confidence, versus I could help you with your blocks or your kicks.
I think a key concept in the book that really stood out to me is how impactful this mislabeling can be towards creating self doubt, impacting your confidence, how you understand yourself. And because we're not really taught this vocabulary and we collapse down to just a few key emotions that, seem to be the right label and move past it as fast as possible, then it's actually doing real sustainable harm to how we see ourselves, what our self image is, what our self esteem is.
And also, it doesn't help us communicate very clearly our needs.
Right.
If you just say, I feel like shit,
Mm.
like, what does that mean? Or even the word upset. I'm upset. Are you frustrated? Are you sad? Are you disappointed? Like, what is it?
And that communication is so key to maintaining and having great relationships in your life, which are so impactful.
You're not kidding. I mean, if we want to move into like couples and colleague space for a minute, I cannot tell you, even, working at a center for emotional intelligence, where this is our life, our livelihood. And it's like when someone is feeling a strong emotion about someone else's work or something about their relationship, it is hard for people to tell people how they're feeling.
Well, let's dive in there because that state of flooded, right? I'm sure a lot of listeners are like, this is great. This is so helpful. These tools sound, in theory, so practical. But then when we are in that moment where we are flooded and it feels chaotic and we are grasping to even try to figure out the vocabulary, what is your advice in those moments that feel the most challenging around the emotional regulation front?
Build space, build the space. You don't have to respond immediately. It's okay. You can say, you know what, AJ, I need a minute. And just go out of the room, go sit in the bathroom if you have to. Go garden for a little while. Do whatever you got to do. Just build a space to lower the temperature so that way you can sort of like really know why you're feeling the way you're feeling and plan your response or plan your conversation. Don't try to do it in the moment. It never works. I've tried it so many times and I freaking it drives me out of my mind. Like, and it's like I can't do it because when I think my partner has done something that, you know, that I just go for the jugular. It's terrible. And so I know now, Mark, you want to stay in this relationship, right? Yes, yes, I do. Okay, good. Then get out of the room. Go downstairs, go work out, go do some yoga, go take the walk. And then you realize, that's where some of the strategies come in. One of them is called time travel, where you ask yourself, like, was I really pissed at what he said or what she said? Or is that I'm just tired. How much will this matter to me in a week from now? I'm not even going to remember it.
Right.
And so, like, why bother? Like, really, what's like, what are you gonna go back and now, you know? And so, when you build the space, that's when you can become more kind of rational, about the experience. So I tell people, if you have to pinch yourself, like, pinch yourself, whatever it takes. Do not go from automatic, habitual, unhelpful reaction to automatic, breathe, build space, healthy response.
I'm feeling a sense of relief hearing that. That someone who's studied emotional regulation to such a degree, has frameworks around it, still needs to go on that walk.
Are you kidding? Especially when it's like, whatever. It's like, we made a deal here. We're not buying any more stuff, right? Or whatever it is, like,
Yeah.
remember we had a conversation about this last week? Remember that? Remember that? And it's sort of like, yeah, here we go.
So in wrapping, our audience loves frameworks and acronyms, and I know you're a big proponent of ruler, and probably could spend another hour on it. But tying a bow on everything we chatted around it, I'd love to wrap with this.
Ruler is an acronym for 5 skills: recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate. Today, we focused mostly on the kind of, well, we did a little bit of everything actually, but the focus is on kind of dealing with feeling, my book, and regulation. And I think, you know, start with giving yourself permission to feel, build your emotional vocabulary, have, like, notice how your budget is working for or against you, strive towards having greater self compassion than being a self denigrator. Know that you should do this with relationships and have people you can talk to about this, and schedule your well being time. Those are the basics. And obviously, I go into the depths of how to do that, you know, but I think if you can get all those buckets understood and filled with things that are helpful for you, you're going to have a way better time dealing with your feelings.
You shared something there that I think is really helpful. I know it's been super helpful in my own journey in joining a men's group and doing men's work, is this sharing that I'm working on this area. Like I've recognized that, in certain contexts or certain situations, my emotional regulation is just non-existent. And it's an area that I want to grow in. And sharing that with your partner, with a friend, with a group of men is so impactful for you developing these skills and them giving you the space to work through developing these skills.
Correct. And I always joke, like, the 90s were my anger years. Like, I was just angry at the way I was, like the way my parents brought me up, and I was angry about a lot of things. I'm now 55. I'm like, enough with the anger. It's like, grow up, Mark. It's like, your parents were, you're a man now. Um, but now I'm chronically overwhelmed. And so I find that I'm really kind of dedicating my regulation strategies to dealing with that. And I think that's interesting to think about your life.
Yeah.
There'll be, throughout life, there'll be certain weeks and months where you're going to have to focus in on more on regulating one particular emotion more than another. And that's kind of interesting to just, know about ourselves. And then you see how that, you know, I've noticed that, how the strategies I like to use for being overwhelmed, which are mostly like setting limits, you know, self-care stuff, are really different than the strategies for like anger and frustration. And so uh, I'll end by saying, I think it's life's work. And there's a beauty to that because it means you don't have to be perfect. If you just accept the fact that I'm going to have feelings for the rest of my life and I can't predict everything that's going to happen, then you just accept the fact that, you're in learning mode forever.
Well, thank you for making the time and space for us in your season of overwhelm. This was a fun conversation.
I appreciate it. Thank you, AJ.
Where can our audience find out more about the work you do and the app again?
The book is called Dealing with Feeling. You can get that anywhere you kind of look for books. Um, the app is called How We Feel. You can find that in the App Store, both in the Android version and the iOS version. And then I think the best place for people to learn more about my work and my podcast called Dealing with Feeling also is just my website, which is Marc with a C, M-A-R-C, Brackett, BRACKETT.com.
Thank you, Mark. Enjoy your time in the pool this evening.
Yeah, thank you.